What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Rewired Soul podcast. It's your host, Chris, the guy who reads an insane amount of books, and I love talking to authors about interesting subjects. And today I am so honored and have the pleasure of talking with one of my favorite authors of one of my favorite books. He's actually the co-author of this book. His name is Justin Tosi. And the book is called Grandstanding, the Use and Abuse of Moral Talk, all right? So to set the scene real quick, if you missed the episode yesterday, the previous episode with Robin Hanson, we talked about signaling and social signaling. And we had a great conversation about his book, The Elephant in the Brain, why we do the things that we do. All of it is about signaling to others who we are, what our intentions are, what our status is, and all these other things, right? So I wanted to do that episode first before talking with Justin about his book, Grandstanding, because that kind of sets the foundation, and you'll see how we kind of build off of that idea when discussing Justin's book. But I became really interested in this subject back in 2019 when I was, being canceled on YouTube and everything. And I saw just a lot of people, playing the moral high ground. And it was really interesting to me. I think it was interesting to me because, when you are a content creator, it's really easy to have the microscope on you. But I would sit back and I would wonder, I'd be like, if anybody's life was put under a microscope, nobody's perfect, right? But that doesn't really happen often. But so I was wondering about that. I'm like, but why do we do that? Why do we feel the need to publicly say, hey, you're a bad person, this thing you did was wrong? Like, why do we feel the need, right? Especially when, there's already articles about them. And this isn't just about me personally. Like, you see it on the internet all the time. Like, why do people feel the need to tell somebody else, a complete stranger, you're a bad person, right? You're a bad person, this thing you did was bad. Or why do we feel the need to say, hey, I donated to charity, hey, I did this good thing? Or your friends on Facebook who are showing what a great parent they are and stuff like that. Well, a lot of it is signaling who we are, what our morals are, to the tribe. We're saying, this is who I am. So I had this theory, and I'm like, I need to get this book. So I waited months and months and months and months for this book, Grandstanding, to come out in audio format, and it finally did, and I binged it. So Justin co-authored this book with a gentleman by the name of Brandon. They're both awesome, and I'm going to link both of their social medias down below, as well as this book right here. But like I said yesterday in the episode with Robin Hanson, this will help you just have a new lens in which you see things, especially on social media, especially, right? Whenever you're like, why did they say this? Why did they leave this comment? Why did they post this? Why did they tweet this? This conversation with Justin about his book will really help you out, and I highly recommend you check out his book. But anyways, if you haven't yet, if you're new, make sure you're following me over on Instagram and or Twitter at The Rewired Soul. I have a bunch of cool stuff. You can, talk to me, give me book recommendations, author interview recommendations, all that stuff, and my DMs are open. I love chatting with all of you and having conversations and all that stuff. So make sure you're following me. That's all linked down below. But anyways, without further ado, here's my conversation with Justin Tosi about his book, Grandstanding. Hello, Justin, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it because I love the book. I recommend it all the time, and I feel like it is such an important book. I remember being like, someone needs to write a book about this, and then somehow I came across you and Brandon's book. But yeah, so as you know, I've mentioned it to you, privately, but I've also mentioned this very publicly. I even wrote a book about it, but I was canceled back in 2019, and that's when I became just fascinated with this entire subject. Like, I could not, for the life of me, understand why complete strangers were attacking me and talking about me, right? Like, hundreds of thousands of strangers So your book Grandstanding was one of the best books I came across to help me understand what's going on. And I'm actually about to read it again for a second time. But anyways, can you just take a minute for those who are not fortunate enough yet, keyword being yet, to have read your book? Can you kind of explain the thesis of, what is grandstanding and why do people do it?
Our book is about moral grandstanding. If you want just a short bumper sticker type explanation of what moral grandstanding is, it's just the use of moral talk for self-promotion. So it's people talking about justice or the right thing to do, or criticizing other people for their moral failings in order to look good themselves. The thesis of the book is that we have good reason to believe that moral grandstanding is common, and also that we should think moral grandstanding is itself a moral problem. So why is it common? Well, we think that grandstanding is just like any other way that people try to enhance their status through self-presentation. So if you look at just about any positive trait, there's a phenomenon of people using whatever opportunity they can find to show off what they have of that trait, or at least to make it look like they have some admirable degree of that trait. They're especially kind, or they're, if they're a member of a religious community, they're especially devoted to the faith, or if they're an academic, that they're especially smart, or something like that. So it's just natural for people to act this way, to try to impress other people, to show them how remarkable they are, and morality is no exception. We all want other people to think that we're really good. So why is this a problem? Well, in short, because moral talk's important, and grandstanding interferes with it. So because there's so much grandstanding, that makes people take moral talk less seriously. It also drives us to hold false views in order to stand out when we grandstand. And then finally, as you saw, it causes otherwise unnecessary conflict as people attack one another in order to look good.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's all about status, and so much we're doing is about status. I've really been interested in that subject as well. But when I got interested in this subject, this is something that I personally sit back and look at, myself, my actions, my behaviors, and all this, right? Because it does seep into everything, right? Why do I wear the clothes I wear? Why do I drive the car that I drive? Why do I, play the video games I play? Why do I tell people, right? And there's this weird balance that I've been kind of struggling with, because now that I'm aware of it, right, I'm like, should I still do it? And just personally, in my personal opinion, I think that there's a right and wrong way to do it. Like, I'm very mindful of when I'm posting something like, hey, here's who I am, this is kind of where I am, and stuff like that, if it matters, right? But as you mentioned, and this is what I love about the book, like, moral talk is so important, right? Like, we're this social species, and if we just go back to the days of our ancestors, we had to know who was good to be within our tribe, right? We don't want some jerk in our tribe. So there are ways that we signal our morality, like reciprocity, right? Like, I give something to you, you give something back to me. I'm like, okay, cool, we can have a relationship. But if I'm giving to you and you're not giving to me, maybe your morals are screwed up. So there are little things that we have to see when it comes to morality. But, in your book, you discuss all the problems that come with it. And one of the main ones is pushing people down to lift yourself up to show your moral status. And that's such an important topic. So, the other thing that I think about constantly, especially in the age of social media and polarization and all that, is something you discuss in the book a little bit, is how this is closely linked to tribalism. So when you're grandstanding, you're telling the world which tribe you belong to, whether it's on politics or social issues, or if someone like J.K. Rowling is transphobic. When you go out there and you say you're a bad person, right? You're signaling, if I'm understanding correctly, you're signaling like, hey, here's who I'm a part of and here's what I stand for. So can you explain a little bit why we psychologically evolved to grandstand and how it's affecting us?
I think you're right to link grandstanding to tribalism. And if you think about just what our tribes amount to and what holds them together, it's pretty easy to see why grandstanding is linked to it. So human beings are social beings. Our groups are really important to us. We think of ourselves in terms of how we belong socially. And so, because of this and because we rely on the other members of our groups in order to thrive in life, it's very important that we remain in good standing in those groups. And so the way that we do that is that we protect our status in the group, that we show that we hold the values of the group so that other group members trust us. So what does grandstanding have to do with this? Well, grandstanding is just one instrument through which we protect our status, that we show people that we have the group's values. So we take any opportunity that we can to show that we are firmly committed to whatever it is that the group believes, and in particular what they believe morally. We also, very often, unfortunately, take opportunities to show that we're better than other group members, or that we are more firmly committed to the group's values than they are. So, if you see an opportunity to point out someone else's moral failings, or at least, failings to live up to the standards of the group, you can not only kind of take down a rival, perhaps, but you can show, through leveling an accusation yourself, that you take the values of the group very seriously. So because it's long been an advantage for people to have skills of promoting their status within groups, it's pretty easy to see then why people would grandstand and why the skill of grandstanding effectively would be an adaptive trait.
Yeah, and I think that's such an interesting thing that you brought up too, is when we think about moral grandstanding and kind of like just like the fighting on the internet and people making these tweets and posts and all this other stuff, I think we often think of like in group versus out group, right? Like, I'm a liberal and I'm showing that I'm liberal because I'm talking trash about this conservative and their views, right? I'm showing that their ideas, their beliefs, they're bad. Here's where I stand. But the point that you bring up is also very important. We do it within our groups to show how committed we are, right? Like, I am pretty left-leaning, liberal type of guy, right? But when we look at the people who are going extreme left and, just throwing out, just accusing everybody out there of being a racist, a transphobic, and all these other things, even people that just want to have a conversation, like, what I see them doing is saying, like, not only am I part of this group, but I'm more committed than you because here's the lengths that I'm willing to go to prove it, right? And I guess that makes sense, the people who are the most committed to a tribe back in the day, they're the ones who are going to go to war or take out vengeance on the other tribe, right? Rather than the guy who just sits in the tribe and just talks about it. So I think it's really important that we look at the extremes we go to within our own group. And sometimes what I feel is very, very toxic is how we put people down who are on our side just to elevate our status within the group. Because especially when we're talking about social change and things that we want, like, as a recovering addict, as a mental health advocate, there's things that we have to get done, like people's lives are on the line. But when there's this in-group fighting just for this kind of moral status, like, and dominance, I'm like, this is totally counterproductive. But yeah, so, when I started noticing this, like I started, seeing everything on social media through this lens of grandstanding. Like I not everything, but I just started noticing it everywhere. I just started noticing like, why are you posting this? I'm like, you're signaling, your morals. So, like even on Twitter, it's especially noticeable. Like I find this so weird, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. Like people who don't even have followers will tweet their thoughts and opinions on moral issues with this like absolutely minimal chance that anybody will even see it, right? They maybe have like 5 followers or something. Some of them don't even have followers. Sometimes I'll check and it's like 0 followers and all they do is comment and tweet about things. I'm like, who are you talking to? So I'm curious, why do you think that people will take these hard stances and morally grandstand when there's little to no chance that anybody from their, quote unquote tribe will see it?
This is a really good question. Here's a related issue that's actually even harder for us, I think, but it's the same kind of thing, and that is anonymous grandstanding, where there's just no gain in status possible because nobody knows who you are. You're just an anonymous screen name, nothing tying you to it, anything like that. So one possibility in both of these kinds of cases is that people hope to get a reaction on the forum itself and enjoy the esteem of others in that form, even if it goes no further. So they want the likes on the YouTube comments. They want the follow-up comments, saying like great insult, great burn, whatever. Another possibility that I think doesn't fit as easily with our account of grandstanding, but does fit with the psychology, is that people want to look good in their own eyes. This is something that we talk about in the book. So in a sense, you could think, well, they're their own audience in this case because they've proven to themselves they care enough to type out whatever like nasty thing about the person who did something very bad, and so they feel good. They feel self-righteous. So in that case, you might think, well, maybe what they're after isn't so much social status as self-respect. So it's maybe a weird form of grandstanding.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. The interesting thing about social media, and as a content creator, I've seen it, I've experienced it, like social media equals the playing field where at any given moment, any random person out there can go viral, right? So, I could see this, social media kind of incentivizes people to just tweet to the void, and maybe just somebody will randomly come across it, because of a hashtag or something, or the right person sees it and retweets it. So there's kind of like this lottery system where you never know if this, grandstanding tweet you just did is going to just take off, or, same thing on like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or whatever it is. But yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. How we care about how we see ourselves, right? We have this identity and we do these things, right? Like if I want to prove I'm a tough guy, even if it's not to other people, I might just do tough guy things by myself, even though it's not to impress anybody else. It's just kind of solidifying my identity with myself. So that's super interesting. And yeah, like, wow, I haven't even thought of that. But speaking of interesting, one thing I found interesting about the book is like how self-aware you guys are when you're writing the book. Like Brandon and yourself address that people may wonder if you two are grandstanding just by writing this book. And personally, I think you guys did an amazing job just kind of diving into this topic and touching on it a few times throughout the book. So as someone who is self-aware about their own grandstanding, are there any times where discussing your moral values is justified? Like, if so, because, a lot of the book, and, you mentioned a little bit earlier, like, it's important that we have moral talk. So how do we check in with ourselves to know when we're justifiably taking a moral stance?
Okay, so I want to be really clear about this one thing. We think it's important that people talk about their moral values. So it's not anything like, a special case when it's okay for people to talk about their moral values. So we're not criticizing moral talk in general. We also think that lots of moral talk, probably the vast majority, is not grandstanding. Okay. So one thing that we talk about, though, is, you want to make sure that you are contributing to public moral discourse for the right reasons. Because if you're not, then you should worry. Maybe I'm going to say things that I shouldn't. My views won't be well considered. I might make things worse rather than better. So what we think you should ask yourself before you type whatever into the box and hit post is, well, if I type this out and I post it and no one were impressed with what I had to say, if no one thought any better of me or thought what a great guy or whatever, anything like that, would I be disappointed? Or would I think, well, who cares? It wasn't really about me to begin with. And we think that if you would be disappointed by not getting anything out of the exercise, then that should worry you. That should make you think, well, maybe I'm grandstanding. Maybe I'm just doing this to get points, to get recognition. And if that's what your sort of self-examination suggests, then maybe you ought to sit this one out because you're just polluting public moral discourse like all of the other moral grandstanders.
Yeah, and you know what that makes me think of? Like sometimes, people look at me like I'm crazy when I say this, but I'll explain why I say this in just a second. Like I say, I'm grateful that I had this insane drug addiction and I had to get sober because one of the things I was taught, one of the first things I was taught for, this foundation of my recovery and just trying to be a better person was to check my motives on just about everything. A lot of it was just, because many of us addicts are just like selfish and self-centered and self-seeking and, anything I'm doing, I'm just trying to build myself up or get something from you. Like I'm only nice to you to get something in return. So part of just trying to become a better person, I always check my motives, but I'm grateful because I'm able to take lessons like that as well as, many others and apply it to the rest of my life because, as you mentioned, it's this kind of like checking in with ourselves before we type it in, just that pause. I just had a conversation with Ron Purser about mindfulness, and mindfulness taught me to take that pause. Although, our conversation was about, some issues with mindfulness and, neoliberalism and capitalism and all that. But there are valuable lessons, and I've learned to pause more and check in with myself like, why am I doing this? Why am I posting this, right? Like, if somebody's doing something that I disagree with and I just reply, you're a dick, right? Like, what was the point of that? I've thought about that too, just, when driving. I think that was an example I used to go to. It's like, why am I honking at this person? Do I think it's going to change them? Am I adding anything or, whatever? And honking might not be a good example because I kind of think like you do train people, like maybe somebody didn't know and now they're like very mindful of that moving forward. But it's similar in the sense of like, why am I doing this? Am I doing this to show that I'm a big tough guy? Am I honking to show that, hey, I'm the dominant person and this is just me showing my status? And it's the same thing online. Why am I doing this? Am I hoping somebody sees it? Am I hoping this goes viral and all this? Because, a lot of our values are screwed up. Like if you're spending all day just being toxic and not contributing to, good faith conversation, right? Like if you're only doing it for the recognition or the potential virality or the little dopamine hits from the likes, like it's time to take a step back and be like, yo, like, is this really even healthy? Am I doing anything worthwhile? Am I helping or hurting the situation? But yeah, I got just one more question for you. All right. So once I became canceled, I became obsessed with moral philosophy. Like not only did I read books about philosophers like Immanuel Kant and Jeremy Bentham, but I read books like yours and The Righteous Mind from Jonathan Haidt. And I feel like the most important thing I learned is that different people have different moral standards. and that morals aren't black and white. They're on this spectrum. An example I always use is like I don't even like saying I'm a vegetarian because people immediately think that I'm just going to shame them for eating meat or whatever. But I always use that as an example just because, I don't eat meat, you do. And, if I was a crazy vegan or vegetarian, I could be like, you're killing animal. Like, how could you do that? And like take this huge moral high ground, but I realize morality is on a spectrum because even when it comes to meat eaters, right? Like the average American will eat, beef, pork, chicken, whatever. But in some countries, there are sacred animals that you don't eat, so it's morally incorrect. So I kind of just realized that morality is different from person to person. But anyways, what I want to ask is we live in this extremely polarized world, even outside of politics, where if you're not with the group, you're seen as being against it. So what do you think the best strategy is to teach people that morality is different from person to person so we can begin becoming like more accepting of each other's thoughts and opinions and actions and values? Like, how do we start working on that?
This is really hard. One thing that I stress as a teacher of moral philosophy is that I'm not any kind of expert about how to live. I don't know anything that most people don't. So I guess part of me, wants to just kind of beg off and say that about this question that, I'm not an expert about this and I don't really know how to make people more civil or change minds or anything like that. But if you're pushing me to say something here, I'll say it. I think it's important to recognize that morality is very difficult. So, sure, lots of questions and lots of cases. Most of the decisions that we make in everyday life, it's not that hard, to see that, you shouldn't hit someone with your car or anything like that. But there are also lots of really difficult moral issues. And most people probably know a lot of people that they think are decent human beings who are on both sides of a lot of these questions. So I guess one thing that is smart to think here is you don't think that all of these people are evil who disagree with you or who are unsure. So what does this tell you? Well, I think it should tell you just that everything's really complicated. Questions of value are really difficult to adjudicate. And that we should always bear this in mind when we encounter people with different opinions.
I love it. If I just had a magic wand, it would just be to show people that, hey, there's a gray area, right? Some things are a little bit more complicated and nuanced and not so black and white. But anyways, Justin, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And everybody out there listening, I hope you enjoyed this. But what I hope even more is that you check out the description down below. Go follow Brandon. Go follow Justin. In case you forgot, Brandon's the co-author of this book. But follow them both over on Twitter and get a copy of this book. Get 5 copies of this book and hand it out. Just give it to people, right? It's just like anything else that when we're trying to improve ourselves. Like we can't fix any problem if we don't become self-aware. I've had this kind of personal philosophy where I try not to complain about it, willing to look at it within myself and try to fix it, right? I do my best to not be a hypocrite. So if I'm running around looking at people and saying, oh, these people are, morally grandstanding and stuff like that, I got to make sure that I'm not doing it, right? Especially as a father, I want to, be a good example for my son and all this. But, I think the heart of what we're talking about here is that we need to have better conversations. And like Justin said, morality, especially like moral philosophy has been, been thought about for thousands of years. It's complicated and we need to just be able to talk about it, right? Like there are some things like Justin mentioned, like we're not going to go out and murder and hit people with our cars and stuff like that, but we need to be able to talk and hear somebody out and hear what their side is, see where they're coming from. Maybe it's how they were raised. Maybe they were raised in a community where they didn't know any better. You know what I mean? But when we jump to just extreme emotions, we don't even give that person the opportunity to let us know who they are and where they're coming from. You know what I mean? So hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. And like I said, please do yourself a favor and get this book. But what I was going to say is do the world a favor and get this book, because the more of us who could stop morally grandstanding, the better this world will be. All right. But anyways, check out the description down below. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter at The Rewired Soul. And if you're new to the podcast, make sure you're subscribed to it or following it, whether it's on Spotify or Apple. And please, just 2 seconds out of your life, if you're listening on Apple, and leave a rating and review. The podcast is only a couple months old, so it really helps the algorithms and get the podcast out there when you leave ratings and reviews. It also helps if you share it with others. So if you know a lot of people in your friend group who likes to morally grandstand, maybe just share this. Just share it. Don't tag anybody. Just share this episode and hopefully they come across it. All right. But also down in the description below, if you want to support the podcast in any way, the Patreon links down below, links to the books that I've written over on therewiredsoul.com. And there was an affiliate link for BetterHelp Online Therapy service that I've personally used. And it helped me out a lot when I was being canceled and had a lot of people morally grandstanding. So I highly recommend BetterHelp. So check out that affiliate link if you would like to work with a qualified licensed therapist. All right. But anyways, I have another episode for you all tomorrow, and make sure you follow me because I'm going to be doing a lot of episodes. But tomorrow I have Megan Daum. She wrote this amazing book called The Problem with Everything. And I think it's a great way to kind of wrap up this topic of, social signaling, moral grandstanding, and kind of the state of the world today and what we can do about it and how we can have better, more nuanced conversations. So make sure you tune in tomorrow for the episode with Megan Daum. All right. But anyways, thank you again so much for listening. Have an amazing rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.